From day one, we are told who we should be, how to live, and what's acceptable. Before we even have a chance to discover ourselves, our society has already drawn those lines for us. But what happens when those lines are keeping us from knowing and embracing who we truly are? Welcome to Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox, a podcast about unpacking and unlearning everything that's kept you from living as your true self. Through honest conversations about your internal emotional landscape, sexuality, coming out later in life, relationships, and the journey to self-acceptance, we break free from the boxes we never chose. On today's episode of Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox, I have a guest named Sogol, who is a friend and also a colleague, a fellow clinician. And also, Sogol is a late bloomer. We have many things in common, including coming out when our kids were very young. This presents its own set of challenges. Going through this early adolescence all over again when you are later in life and you're trying to balance being a parent and being available while you also are having this awakening and just coming into yourself for the first time and really exploding with your gayness. So today we talk about the ways in which sometimes things don't work out exactly as you want them to, or as you imagine they're going to. And also just share this idea that when you are human, there are regrets. If you're living your life fully, you will have regrets. For those of you out there that feel really terrified that you might regret something that you've done, I just want to say welcome to being human. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. So I'd love for you to just give a little bit of background about your gayness. When did you have an inkling that you might be queer, and what happened from there with that?
Sure. So I always knew since I was, as far back as I can go, maybe when I was 4, I had a crush on these girls in my swimming lesson.
I love it. So
And
cute.
they were older than me, but I didn't know that was a crush, right? So that was the first inclination at the age of 4, and that always lingered. It was always part of my experience, and I always had all these women crushes, and I didn't know what to call them. Maybe a bit of a background. I lived up until the age of 18 in Iran, in Tehran. I'm from a big city. There are many gays in Tehran. Living a happy life, but obviously they can just be out and about, and there are gays. I'd like to acknowledge that.
There are gays, but it's not something that you want to publicize, and you're certainly not out at work, I'm guessing.
And it was, to be honest, it was easier to be lesbian in Iran than to be straight, because I went to all-girls school. And holding hands in our culture is very normal.
Oh, I love that.
People hold hands. So you could get away with that and people wouldn't have found out. But what I had internalized, and I didn't know at the time, that's called internalized homophobia, or like, oh my God, like I have all these feelings. So that also stayed a big part of my experience when I moved out of Iran for educational purposes, but there were other purposes to live an autonomous life. And as much as I like to think of myself as an interdependent being, and at the time I was very opinionated and I thought I'm living an autonomous life, I don't need my parents. And they were encouraging me. That's the other thing. My mom was a breadwinner. That I have a bit of a different, maybe cultural experience than most women in Middle East would say. I had a mom who was very strong, highly educated, always encouraged me and gave me the wings to fly, to be, just to be myself. And I remember her saying her wish for me was not to get married. She would actually say, please be independent. and have a life that you can afford. And then you're able to choose. Don't rush it. Even on the day that I wanted to get married, she looked me in the eye and she said, "Are you sure?" And to this day, like her face keeps showing up. And, when I came out and we went through our up and down, and I asked her, I'm like, "Mom, what was that about? Did you have some kind of inclination, that possibly this is not an okay choice for my very gay daughter because she does not shut up about all these women." I remember talking nonstop about an English teacher, this arts teacher, and I'm inspired by them, and you think you're inspired, but you don't know what that truly is, right? And I was 16, 17, and it wouldn't stop. My coming out story is maybe something actually that I had to acknowledge to myself. When I got pregnant, I think the hormones really kicked in, and the emotional crush also turned into a sexual one, a sexual fantasy. I think up until then, in part, it was internalized homophobia. I never let myself to have any fantasies, but I couldn't stop.
I think we have that in common. I think we talked about
We
this.
talked about that.
Because I also, when I was first pregnant with my twins, it was the first time I really allowed myself to fully fantasize about being with a woman. But it wasn't until I was pregnant with them. Prior to that, I never allowed myself to fantasize.
Right. And I think I can tell you then, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe this is what all my peers were, all boy crazies. And I was never a boy crazy person. And I'm like, oh, that's what that is. I was pregnant at the time. And I remember I called my best friend, who was a psychiatrist actually from elementary school. And she lived in Germany at the time. And I called her up and I said, "Okay, can you find me research that supports this experience?" I know, it's too silly. She's like, "What is going on?" And I said, "I'm having all these fantasies about women. Can you find me a research that actually proves or, supports the idea of a person being pregnant and actually have a switch in their sexuality?" And
Did she find it? Did she find the research?
She didn't find it. She didn't tell me. She's like, "Oh, it's just your hormones.
It's just normal. This is like, it's probably all women that are pregnant have these feelings, right?"
Plus, like, talking to my mom, and she's like, "Well, we don't have to act on our fantasies." I'm like, "Mom, are you also gay?" Right? Talking to my aunt, and she's like, 99% of women go through this too. I'm like, "Oh, and no wonder, all the genes. Thank you." Yeah. And then developing crushes one after the other, year after year, on all these straight women around me. It became really painful. It became so painful that my very close friend now, our kids went into the same school, and she's really lovely, lovely human being, a Jewish woman. She had a way with just expressing herself and just being very open and accepting. And I felt safe for the first time to actually tell her, "You're inviting me to cottage. You're asking me to go on trips with you. And this is becoming really difficult. And I need to tell you something." And I remember it was so hard. It was so difficult. And she's like, "Well, honey, if it's this difficult, maybe you don't want to share." I'm like, "No, no, no. I want to tell you. I want to tell you, please." I said, I'm attracted to."
Wow. I love that you did that. So many women really struggle at that moment to do that.
Yeah. And she's like, "Wow, I'm flattered, but I don't do women." And that sentence right there was the most therapeutic thing I could have ever heard from any close friend. And she said, "Let's go for lunch. We need to talk about this because life is short and you need to have fun."
Ah, what a good friend.
Very good friend. Yeah. And so that was the initial actual experience for me to acknowledge to myself and to somebody else. That wasn't mirrored back. But then with the help of my therapist, She's like, you can't keep living like this, hitting on straight women. It's a safe way to go back in the closet, but not really. So that took me a while to kind of want to actually be on, dating apps and start actually practicing that.
And so let me just rewind for a second.
Yeah.
So you always had crushes, and then somewhere along the road you left your country, right?
Yeah.
You ended up in Canada.
In 19, yeah, when I was 19, actually.
When
Yeah.
you were 19.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point you got married.
Right.
To a man.
To a man, yes.
Yeah.
I had all the opportunities to date women, and I think many things. One, obviously, the internalized homophobia. The other thing was just me as a person, being the firstborn, the good kid, all those wounds, right? Not knowing myself and being kind of cut off from my sensuality, and being an intellectualizer, thinking that if I find a man who is, it sounds really horrible, who doesn't smell like a man, who smells okay and dresses nicely and is feminine. I was never into men who were alpha
Macho men. Yeah.
at all. That would not do it for me.
Same.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, very feminine men. Yes.
Yeah.
Except for my husband. He was not feminine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, if I ever want to get married, it would have to be someone like him. He's really kind and gentle and safe. My dad had some temper issues, love him to pieces, but I think that really scared me to even want to, trust men emotionally. Now, people may think, oh my God, maybe that's why you're lesbian. I can argue that maybe that's why I'm actually who I am, because, I was disconnected from my sensuality, a big part of me, because I didn't really feel safe around men. So I disconnected from that altogether.
It sounds like there were a lot of other reasons why you disconnected also, including the homophobia became internalized, but that it was there from so early, like the crushes were there. They were there from the very beginning.
The word lesbian, I learned about the word lesbian when I was 16. And I'm like, oh, that's what that's called. Okay. And I remember, even now that I'm retelling the story, I can feel that feeling in my body of like, I don't want to be that. That's not me. I just like these women. It's not sexual. Mm-hmm. And you'd be surprised to know that I went to therapy in Canada, and the therapist, who was a clinical psychologist, sadly, I was disclosing about my fantasies to her, and this is before I marry a man. She said, there's nothing sexual here, and you can love everybody. And she kind of just like dismissed that aspect, which was really bad therapy.
Yes.
And I'm very mindful of that as a therapist today. And back to your question, yeah, I met my husband after 10 years of living in Canada. I dated men only. I dated men, and I rejected all of them, from the most good looking to like the most educated, everybody who fit the criteria. I know, Sam, maybe the Iranian and the Jews have this in common. There's a lot of snobbery around like education. So they have to fit a certain criteria with like social status and education. So I internalized that. I grew up with that, and I looked for that. Mm-hmm. And all the men I dated were all like, oh, professor this or doctor this, right? Mm-hmm. And my ex-husband has a PhD also and professor, a very kind man, very gentle soul, very feminist. I met him and I said, I'll take one of those as a husband. That's good. He's good enough. And we got married, and our families got along. I really liked my ex-in-laws. They were very open. They were Iranian. They were very progressive. His mom is super progressive. And I felt safe around that kind of openness. And I felt the opposite of suffocation. I'm like, if ever we have any troubles, they won't suffocate me. Mm. And it happened. It actually happened. And, fast forward, 16 years after, my ex-mom-in-law came to the parade with me last year.
To the Pride Parade.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then we have a daughter that I'm out to, extremely open and supportive, and so is his family. So I think in a nutshell, maybe to summarize that, being a good girl, doing the right thing. At the time I finished my master's and it was time to look for a husband. Both my parents were like, "Are you sure? You don't have to get married. We don't want that for you. If you don't want it, you don't have to." And I kind of was going through a bit of like, oh, all my friends are, they have a professional degree and they're getting married. So I have to follow the rules and be the good girl. And I
So
think
interesting that even without that message being sent to you from your parents, which most people grow up in families where that is the messaging, that's what's expected of them, even if it's implicit, that your parents were explicit about the fact that you did not have to follow that path, but that you still felt the pressure from just society to do that.
Yeah. And plus, not having enough mirroring in the environment. Even in Canada, this may be surprising, but I did most of my adult life in Canada, and at the time, and I was exposed to gay men, but not that many lesbians. And I'm thinking, like, even if I had just like one lesbian couple friend, maybe that would have made me change my mind, and it would have normalized it for me. And plus, all my straight friends were complaining about their sex life with their husbands. So that didn't really help.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, maybe everybody's like that. And yeah. And,
Right.
as you said, it's very complex and nuanced, and it's working in so many ways. And everyone's from the outside says, "Oh my God, look at the two of you. What a great match. Families click, and like, wow, this is awesome." And
Yeah, all the approval that you get from
all the
society.
approval you get, and then the emptier you feel inside and the more miserable you feel inside.
Yes, I
I
had that
couldn't
too.
pinpoint something severely is missing here, and I
Mm-hmm.
can't understand it. And then we found an amazing therapist. The first session, I said, "Listen, I don't know if I'm here because of me or there's something wrong in our marriage, and we both are willing to walk the journey and figure it out." And dating men was just like, if they were getting anywhere close sexually, I'd be like, "Okay, bye, gotta go, don't want to see that thing, goodbye." And I'm glad that I did the work I did, because then I realized, oh my gosh, I have suppressed and repressed all of myself in terms of my sexuality as well. And that took a lot of work, and that was all before my catalyst.
Was the realization that you were gay, essentially, did it come to you before you started having those fantasies while you were pregnant? Did you realize it before? It was after?
The therapist before the gay man, who was a straight woman, she said, "How about you go ahead and try?" And I was so offended by that. I was so offended. I'm like, straight people never are, they're never told, "Go ahead and try to find out if you're straight." And that was so telling for me, because I knew it. I knew it, fully. I mean, this is my experience. It could be different for others. I can't speak for others, but I was so sure. I was like, "No, I don't even need to try. I know. I freaking know I am so gay." Yeah.
It's so interesting because I had a similar experience when I came out to my husband of the time, and I just said, I'm having feelings for somebody, and I think I'm gay. And he said, what if we just get you like a studio apartment and you can kind of try it out, and see.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, like, I know I don't need to go see, I don't need to have an apartment where I go just to have sex in the apartment. Like, I am gay. Like, I'm gay all the time, not just going to an apartment and having sex with somebody,
Don't need a sex pod.
Yes, exactly. So I can relate to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So then you realized it. And so this is after you had your daughter. So I guess how long after giving birth and, starting to raise her, did you have this awakening of like, okay, I need to live a lesbian life?
Great question. As a therapist who is obsessed with self-awareness,
I know it's pretty wild how cloudy and murky some of this stuff can be, right?
yeah, and recognizing this after the fact, I did a great job of exiting and avoiding and not wanting to deal. And for me, a great deal of that was intellectualizing or traveling or wanting to move cities or countries or homes.
A lot of busyness, yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's always a purpose.
Right. Right.
Until, you're really faced with the pain of, I have crush and this is developing into feelings and this is developing into, I want more of you. I want to spend more time with you. And this is not just sexual, and it is everything. It is, spiritual, sexual, emotional. And, the busyness. I know you had 3, and I don't know how you did 3. So I had 1, and the busyness of being with 1 and just managing that. I had a private practice at the time. And then the postpartum stuff, like I had a birth trauma and it was really difficult. She was really hard to soothe and I was desperate and, sleep deprived and all of the above. So it was a huge distraction. You don't feel sexual. It was not the case for me. I did not like how I looked, smelled, or let alone want to have sex.
Yeah.
So I kind of tamed it a little bit for a while and it distracted me until she was about 3 that all my crushes came full blown and they wouldn't stop. Like it would just switch from one straight woman to the next. And then my last strategy was to apply for PhD. And I did, and I got in. And I had an amazing therapist who said, listen, you're going to date. And dating is going to help with a PhD. I remember April when I finished first year, all the courses, I was like, I'm going on a dating app right away. And I did and found my first girlfriend and catalyst. And
so let me just stop you for a second. So at this point, you'd done the therapy, you'd realized that you're gay, and you and your husband had you already sort of started living in separate parts of your home, or were you still in the same bed? Okay.
Oh, that started when my daughter was, wow, that's hard to remember. Maybe 2.5.
Okay. I just was curious because you're married and you have a child and you're in the PhD program and you're starting to date, but I was just curious how that went down. So you were living in the same house. You had decided together that you were going to be able to remain married but just live separately in the same house, and he supported you exploring your sexuality and no longer being intimate with him.
For sure. Yeah. I remember at some point, I think it was during COVID, my daughter was FaceTiming a friend of hers and she was 5 at the time, and she says, this is my bedroom and this is my mommy's bedroom. And my daddy doesn't sleep in the same bed because my daddy doesn't want to sleep with her. He has his own bedroom too. So this is our house and this is our family arrangement. I'm like, wow, okay, great for broadcasting that, Nelia. Thank you.
Yeah, and also for her, that was probably just so normal. Like that was just, this is what my house is like. And It's amazing how, and we both have this same experience, that when you come out and your kids are so young, because mine also, my daughter was 2.5 and my boys were 5 when I came out, they grow up with you being out and they haven't yet internalized homophobia.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. Okay. Proceed. So.
Yeah. And then I think my daughter was around 6.5 when I actually started the relationship with my catalyst. And that lasted about 1 year and 9 months.
Okay. And so that was your first real full-blown lesbian experience in a full relationship.
It was all I ever wanted. I felt so alive, like I had never experienced anything like that before. And I think you and I talked about the obsession. She was a lifelong lesbian, and was just fascinated by everything about her. And, I was obsessed with her and with the relationship. And I was like, I remember telling myself, that's all I ever wanted. I figured it out. This is great. That's it. And it lasted for about a year and 9 months. I mean, I ended it. I realized towards the end, there's a reality that we're not, love can't solve all your problems. There needs to be some kind of compatibility.
Mm-hmm. Love is not enough.
No.
Right.
And she took that the wrong way. She read that as like, oh, my love is not enough for you. And just created a lot of imbalance in terms of what we both needed. And it was not compatible. And certainly, some people, they do some work. And, as therapists, we may have some higher expectations, but I think it was important for me, for someone that I call a partner, to have some kind of self-awareness, and for me to not do all the emotional work
Labor.
in the relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though I was much younger, it felt like that. It felt like I'm doing all the work and the other person's just in it for the convenience and love and attraction and fun. And, having a young child makes a huge difference. I think you and I talked about how other women who are, I call them single people who don't have children. They're truly single because they're, they have more autonomy in terms of time and space. So I didn't have that. I mean, in many ways, I am privileged to have different experiences, with my ex, and I hear all these horror stories of women, difficult experiences of the husband not accepting them, but also not having the luxury of just being a lesbian woman who is just exploring different relationships, and I think you and I kind of talked about regret and jumping into a relationship just based on attraction and the mirroring back. I think for me, she was the first woman that mirrored back the attraction piece, because all the women I hit on, they were straight.
Right.
They wouldn't mirror me back. And so it was disappointing, but this was the first one who was head over heels, and so was I. And I felt, oh my God, there's mutual attraction. So there are many good things that I learned from that relationship from her, and there are some regrets as well.
I'm curious about, so you have this living situation that's not, I'm going to say it's not like a boxy living situation, right? You're married to a man, you have a child, you're a lesbian, you're not getting divorced, you live together in the same house, he lives on a separate floor, and you co-parent together, and you're living your life, you're getting your PhD, and you're dating.
Yeah.
And you meet this person who mirrors back. She's just as gay as you are, which feels amazing for a time.
Yeah.
Until you realize she's not as self-aware as you would like her to be, and you're doing the emotional labor. How did your structure of family life and living arrangements play into the relationship? Like, was she cool with that? Did she want you to do something different? What happened with the structure that was working for you when you got into this relationship? Did something change?
That's a great question. I think I experienced a lot of shame because of my arrangement with the ex-husband. And I think I'm learning from the queer community that there are people who can be extreme in the community. Just because a person is gay doesn't mean they're like open to everything. And some people have different capacities. I understand that. But in specific to that relationship, she didn't have much tolerance for the fact that he was in the same house. And
so was it something you would argue about, or that she would just...
Yeah, to the point of an ultimatum. And she said, if he doesn't leave, I will never, ever come to your place. You're more than welcome to come here. And I'll never, and that kind of created a huge fight. And because of all the parts I wanted to be with, I was willing to let go of what I already built and what was already a part of me. And I have regrets about that because it was not the best choice to have him leave the house. I kind of feel like I forced him to do that. I'm not proud of it. You know, afterwards, I apologized to him and I felt horrible for it. It was not the best decision for anybody to just have him leave the house. It was not very kind of me to begin with. It was not a well thought out plan for a family, especially when you have a young child. I put my daughter through a phase that I'm not really happy about. Like, she didn't have to go through that. All of a sudden, daddy, and then, she's like, oh, I thought that we agreed that daddy stays in the basement, and unfortunately, I'm not proud of it, that I kind of had to put her needs on the back burner and be like, nope, this is what my girlfriend at the time wants to do, and we're going to do it.
And did she then move in with you?
Nope. And she didn't. She didn't move in with me. She's, we started to kind of separate emotionally at that point because she wasn't willing to do what was not convenient. And I noticed this towards the end. And it was more me who was making all the efforts, even just like I had a small child, a PhD student, and all the clients. And she had some part-time, a little bit of a less intense job than me and more time. And I was doing all the traveling, and that did not end well. It was a horrible breakup. It took me over 2 years. I think even I talk about this. I think I have just started to feel healed.
Are you just at the 2-year mark?
It's been 2 years and 2 months.
Okay.
And I feel the difference now. I think you and I were talking about this last year.
The 2-year mark is really... The 2-year
mark was so necessary for all the healing and grieving and crying and just, self-soothing and just being by yourself. And there was a reason I noticed that, there were people who were interested and curious, but I never was like, yeah, let's do it. But I think I'm now ready to see what's out there. That's the level of readiness right now. But that took over 2 years, as you say, a 2-year break to recover fully from that breakup, because she was a representative of many things that I suppressed, and I were given all of a sudden, like she was the opposite of oppression. And I think it wasn't just grieving her, it was grieving the representation of that relationship.
And also just being able to, my guess is being able to really connect to yourself in all of those ways. Like, she brought you that ability to finally be fully gay in a relationship in all the different ways.
Absolutely. And that is one of the things that I'm really grateful for my catalyst, if she ever listens to this podcast. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, one of the things I think that's even though the relationship ended for really clear reasons, it's also, I think, one of those things that I hear a lot, that women grieve when they do lose their relationship, especially when they come out later in life and haven't really had these woman-loving woman relationships before, is that when you're with somebody that really allows you to feel your gayness and then that relationship ends, it's like, how do I keep feeling my gayness?
100%. And I have become aware of a certain need for a mirroring in the space where there is no partner. And this has been a struggle.
Yeah.
That's why, connecting with people like yourself, finding community, right?
Yeah, so important.
It's really important to kind of hold that space of like, you don't have to be in a serious relationship for you to feel gayness. But because we don't get enough mirroring, as queer people in North America and anywhere in the world. I mean, I'm in one of the most gay-friendly countries in the world right now as we speak. But even then, you still don't get enough mirroring as straight people would.
Yeah. And I think that there's another piece here, which I think you and I also have in common. I mean, we really have a lot in common, even though there's an age gap in between us, where there is something different about being the parent of a young child or having young children and newly being out. And there's sort of like a pull of like identity, kind of. There's a tug of war in your identity because there's this identity as a mother and as a parent and needing to be there and show up for your child. And at the same time, there's this desire to, you know, be gay and have relationships and live a gay lifestyle. And it's just hard. It's hard to find that balance. And it's hard to, you know, really do both easily at the same time. And that might sound a little bit strange to somebody who has been gay their whole life and then also had a child. And that they maybe find more balance in it because their identity is more, I don't know, it's more solid. Like they've identified as gay and knew they were gay from very young. And so they really have a very solidified, like they don't need as much mirroring. And so they're a parent, but they're a gay parent, you know, whereas when we come out later, we really have this need to be mirrored, usually by a relationship. I mean, I at least felt that, you know, I had 3 kids to raise. I also went back to school to get my degree and to get my career going. And I always had a partner because I didn't have time to build community with what I had happening with the kids and the schooling. And so I always had a relationship, but they were always at a distance. So it wasn't all the time we spent together, but I knew that I had this like gay section of my life that I would get to interact with daily, interacting with the person and see every however often. That was how I had my gayness mirrored back to me, raising 3 young kids, building a career. And I just think that it is really a piece that I think is very important for those of us that come out later. And especially it gets more complicated when you have young kids because it's kind of pulling at you.
For sure. I really appreciate you bringing this up. It adds to the complexity of the different, aspect of identity that we carry and hold and have to navigate, and sprinkle on top being a therapist. I don't know, a blessing in disguise. It's you have the awareness, you can't undo it, and you are curious. You can't just close your eyes and heart and undo it. And I think you're the same way. You practice what you preach, and you can't just hide all parts of you and ignore the need of your children or yourself, right? I think the difficulty is holding space for a needy child. That's your child or your children in your case. And balancing these two, because a straight person has children and they have to find a way to meet their own needs, like basic needs for sleep and self-care and etc., and the need of their children. Okay, and for us, there's an added layer of being gay, and then you go through a breakup. I think at one point you and I had a conversation about this. It's like, Sam, how did you go through all the breakups with your kids? Oh my God, this is so hard.
Yeah, I look back and I honestly, especially now, I'm single for about 1.5 years, and I haven't had this much time being single in a really long time, if ever, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I look back at those relationships that I had, and of course they were filled with, good things, but also difficulty communicating and arguments and breakups, because there were 5 and all 5 ended, even though they were long term. And so, yeah, getting through that, part of me feels like the busyness, in my case, the busyness of life helped me get through them, especially honestly, working with people.
Yeah.
For me was, in the times where I was like really struggling, it was, as much as it feels like, well, how could you show up for other people when you're really struggling? But there's some kind of a switch that is just so nice to be able to tune into other people's difficulties and help them instead of paying attention to what's happening with me. That was helpful for me. It was a way to, get through and maybe it's why this last year and a half, I've had so much grieving on top of losing my parent, but like really, I keep having these grief cycles that just wash over me. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's coming from many, many years of grieving that I just never had the time to do because I was so busy raising my kids and working.
Absolutely. I think that's the magical power of being a therapist, that you can somehow switch off and be there for others. But then, they come back as a huge waves of grief after
right.
when we feel it. I think, I don't know if I'm getting a little nerdy here. I don't know if you know Janina Fisher, who's a trauma.
Yes, Janina Fisher, yes.
She talks about how she's very grateful for her clients because they keep her on her toes in the moments that she's really dysregulated or can't really hold together, and like she shows up and her clients make her be centered.
Yeah, that happened to me today. I had a session with a couple and I was like, and this couple is typically quite dysregulated. And I've just this week been off and having these grief waves. And I just was like, I don't know how I'm going to show up for this couple with them so dysregulated. And somehow
had the best session.
We did. I had the best session. They were the least dysregulated of any session. And it was really a great session. And it was like, there was something really relieving about that for me. And like, okay, here I am. Like, I found myself again. It's a gift. I mean, being able to do this work is really a gift, and working with people in so many ways. And also, I think it's still important to take the time to tend to our emotions. So I want to just understand. So you had this relationship, it ended. It's been a little over 2 years. You're healing and you feel like you've really given yourself that time to heal. You're starting to open up to the possibility of what else is out there. What ended up happening with your husband, because you guys never did get divorced, that you had asked to move out?
I asked him to move back in. Acknowledging that that was a stupid decision and a horrible choice. And apologizing to him. And, he said, I would be more than happy to do so. But if this happens again, you will be the one who will move out. So we agreed on this.
Okay.
I think it's fair.
Yeah.
And so I think we talked about this, I'm being more intentional post breakup, that I don't want to just go on dates, or I don't do casual dates. It has also been the longest time that I've been single. And before my ex-girlfriend, I was married for like over 10, 12 years. And before then I was dating. So I never got a chance to actually live an adult life as a single person.
Yeah.
And I'm really loving it. There are moments that I think you and I talk about how there's longing and certain loneliness, but overall, I am so grateful for this experience, and him being back in the house with boundaries, and like he's very respectful, very boundaried, having separate space and different schedules, extremely helpful. However, there are times when there's like a long weekend when we see each other more than my capacity, I should say. He's very flexible and open. I get a little triggered back to, oh my God, I'm living with a man. Oh my God, what am I doing? And those moments, I give you a call. This is normal. He's family. Calm down. I'm like, okay. I thought I'm not gay anymore.
Yes, I totally get how that can happen. And also what I really love about your story is there's just so much nuance, and there's so much flexibility, and there's so much, honestly, like kindness and caring that has existed with him. And I know his family also is very much your family. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I really see him as a family member for you. And so, going forward, for right now, this really works. You'll see going forward what happens. But I imagine that when you do meet somebody that you're going to have a relationship with, that's going to be sort of one of the deciding factors for you is this person able to embrace my, you know, I mean, he's your husband still, but he's really your co-parent. Like, is this person able to embrace that I'm co-parenting and living? Again, it doesn't have to be forever. Like that living situation can change, but that this is an important person in my life. His family is important to me. He is important to me, and he will continue to be an important person in my life. He's my daughter's father, and I just like how you've been able to sort of ride this out with him, even though there's been some places where you feel like, oh, I made a mistake. I wish I hadn't done that. And I want to just say, I hear from so many women that are terrified of taking a step and then regretting it. And that the fear of that keeps them from taking the step. And I want to normalize. I hear this from a lot of people, not just women coming out later. I hear from also clients that I work with in therapy. There is such a fear of living a life and having any regrets. And I just,
Realistic.
I feel like that's so unrealistic. I mean, we're human. Like, we are going to make mistakes. We are going to have regrets. And we then can have feelings about them, and we can process them, and we can keep going forward. But if you try to live a life with no regrets, you're not going to live a full life.
Absolutely.
So I love that you shared that piece. I also have many regrets and mistakes that I made along the way in my, ending of my marriage, and also in relationships. Like, we're human, we make mistakes. We have regrets. That doesn't mean, it doesn't really mean anything other than that you're human, and that you're living a full life, honestly.
And I'm really grateful for you sharing this, authentically and so genuinely, and because you're a therapist, because there's also that stigma that therapists have to have figured it all out. And this coming from you, it's just so validating and hopefully normalizing for many who are listening to this.
Yeah thank you. I mean, I really hope so, because regrets are part of everyday life. We make mistakes. We wish we had taken a different path. And, I went to school for 2 years for interior design. I mean, I loved that. I loved painting and drawing and everything, but that was a mistake. I could have saved 2 years and gone to school earlier. Okay. I regret that on some level, but okay.
It also takes a lot of courage and confidence to say no. After 2 years, this is not for me, right?
Yeah. And it's scary. It's really scary after you invest yourself in something. And some of these women that are listening in, you might have invested more than a decade or more than 2 decades into a relationship and into building a family with somebody. And, like, realizing you're gay and needing to pivot and take a different path can be very difficult, and there might be regret. But I think the way to work through the regret is just allowing yourself to grieve. And I think as a society, we really don't support those that are grieving. And it's just, there are not open arms for people that are grieving in society. It's sort of like, well, how can you get happy quickly? Let's get you happy. What can you do to distract yourself from that and whatnot? But a big part of this process is there is going to be regret. There is going to be grieving. And there also is a whole life ahead also that you can have.
Absolutely. I mean, just a cultural piece I like to add. I come from a culture where grieving there's no shame. You go to a wake and everyone's just like crying and holding each other, and like there's absolutely no shame about that. Whereas in North America, there's no break for when you break up, when you lose a loved one, and kind of like, how do you navigate? So I mean, there's the extreme of like just being all over the place with your emotions. and grieving collectively, which I think I value a lot, but also not having any space to grieve at all. So I think that's an important point you're bringing up. We have no space to grieve, but how can we give ourselves permission and the space to grieve?
Yeah. And I literally did a sabbatical for this last year. I put all
Love
of my
it.
coaching programs on sabbatical after I lost my dad. And I just realized I hit a wall and I had so much grieving to do. And I created that space for myself, and it was uncomfortable. But I did it anyway because I just didn't know how else to function. So, sometimes we just have to create the space for ourselves. Society's not going to do it for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
it's been such a joy to have you on and to hear your story. And I love the nuance with which you are living, and also that I know you personally, so I know that you really allow yourself to feel your feelings and process through them. And, I just really appreciate your story and sharing that for everybody here, that we're not meant to live in one box in one way, that there are a lot of different ways to go through this process. And you are living and breathing beautiful proof of that. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Samantha. This was a joy for me as well to kind of, have this chat and conversation with you. And I really am grateful for the work you're doing, for all these women. I myself, came across your YouTube channel and your, TikTok post. I was like, oh, wow, this speaks to me. So this is wonderful. Thank you so, so very much for having me. This was a pleasure.
Thank you for spending this time with me on Unbox Yourself with Samantha Fox. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more folks find these conversations. If you're ready to unbox from something that's keeping you stuck, I would love to support you. You can find the application to the show at unboxyoursexuality.com. Let's stay connected. Find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Lesbian Curiosity Coach. Give me a follow and join the conversation. Remember, we only have this one time through. Why not unbox yourself and let your true self shine in all its beautiful glory?